there are rumors that the Saints could be heavily considering Mike McCarthy, and I talked about it a little bit on the last show. We're going to get into it a little more here. At first, I wasn't really a fan of it, but when I looked deeper into the numbers, and I know you're a Packers fan as well, so you got to experience some of Mike McCarthy before he went to Dallas. Should the Saints really consider Mike McCarthy? And if so, do you have some pros and cons that you can throw at us for, what the Saints can really get out of this guy? Because personally, all things considered with us, I feel humbled to have a guy like Mike McCarthy or even Joe Brady in the mix of being my next head coach. It might not be pretty because of the rebuild that needs to happen, but go ahead and take off for me, Marcus.
I think the Saints should be lucky that Mike McCarthy wants to be their head coach, but I also think Mike McCarthy should be lucky that there's a job as bad as the New York Saints head coaching job that's available, because without a job like this, Mike McCarthy wouldn't be a head coach in the 2025 NFL season. So
yeah, that's very true.
It's one of those really unfortunate matches made in heaven, but like, hey, it works for all parties involved. As far as the pros and cons thing, I can be really hard on Mike right now, and I can talk about how much he underperformed in Dallas. I really could do that, and I do think he severely underperformed in Dallas. I think you can look at least 2 of his, I want to say 5 seasons that he was in Dallas, where they should have at least been in an NFC Championship game because the talent.
3 straight 12-win years.
That good. They definitely should have been in at least one conference championship game because the talent was that good. What I will say, though, is that having Mike McCarthy as your head coach means that your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator has to be out of this world. Like, you have to have guys in those 2 positions who can actually do what they need to do with the talent on the field, because Mike McCarthy cannot. And we've seen it time and time and time again, whether you want to look at it in Green Bay or his time in Dallas. Mike McCarthy has shown time and time again he's not really a play caller. That's not his expertise. Now, here's the unfortunate part of that reality. You can have a really good offensive coordinator and you can have a really good defensive coordinator. And as we've seen in Dallas, your team can still be undisciplined. This is a Dallas Cowboys team that was amongst the top of the league in, penalties and penalty yardage throughout the duration of Mike McCarthy's tenure there. This is also a Dallas Cowboys team who we've seen time and time and time again lose big games, whether it's in the postseason or at the end of the regular season, because of Mike McCarthy's inability to manage the clock. Now, for a team like the New Orleans Saints, who has no expectations, who's going to be a bottom feeder in the conference, as I mentioned earlier, that's fine. Totally fine, which is why I said it's a match made in heaven. For one of some of these other teams out here who are trying to maybe have a little bit of hope this season, that's not okay. So if you're a Saints fan, for the legacy and the aura of Mike McCarthy's past life as a Green Bay Packers head coach, it's certainly an honor to have someone of his caliber, a former Super Bowl winning head coach, on your sidelines as your head coach. But for Mike McCarthy, dude, you should be embarrassed as a head coach that the only job you're likely to get in this coaching cycle is the job for the New Orleans Saints. Like, think about it. We're talking about a coaching cycle that had a job for the Raiders, where the Raiders thought they'd be better off with Pete Carroll, who didn't coach at all this season. We're talking about a job that was available, that had the Jacksonville Jaguars were available, and they thought they'd be better off with Liam Cohen than you. No disrespect to him, but if you guys haven't heard about how convoluted that whole process was to him becoming the head coach, read up on it. Like, they would much rather deal with all of that confusion than have you. Like, dude, there's some jobs out here. Like, the Bears would rather have Ben Johnson, which I'm not opposed to. I think Ben Johnson, Ben Johnson, young guy. He's certainly a better coach than Mike McCarthy, I think, will be for Caleb Williams. But still, they'd rather have a guy who they just watched his offense look god-awful. They'd rather take a chance on him than take a chance on you. So that says a lot about Mike McCarthy. But if you're a Saints fan, I don't know off the top of my head who y'all's coordinators are, but they got to be all world with this roster if you guys are going to be any sort of competitive, because Mike McCarthy can't call plays to save his life. If someone had a gun to your head and said, I need call, and said, Mike McCarthy needs to call a perfect game or I'm pulling the trigger, take the gun out of his hand and pull the trigger. It's not happening. So that's where I'm at on Mike McCarthy. But more important, but like I said, Mike McCarthy should almost be embarrassed that the Saints are the only people that are actually willing to hire him and put him on their sidelines.
Yeah, as you utter these sentiments about my favorite sports team of all time, I just have to keep looking back at this logo, bro. I just got to keep reminiscing, brother. I had to wear the Super Bowl jersey tonight because I knew it was going to be rough. We are getting back to the Aints, as much as I hate to say it. I mean, that's what's happening. And, I knew it was going to be rough after Drew left, but, for a coach to feel embarrassed to have us as the only option says a lot. For Aaron Glenn going the other way says a lot when he was familiar here. And again, I wanted someone outside of the Peyton regime, which I hope that our GM knows what that means. Apparently he doesn't. But yeah, in terms of our coordinators, we have Joe Woods as the DC, which I think he piggybacked a lot off of Dennis Allen's defense, which was, pretty shot by the time he left. And then Clint Kubiak, who was great for 2 weeks, and then afterwards dealt with injuries to the offensive line, dealt with injuries to the quarterback. No Chris Olave, no tight end presence. Alvin Kamara hurt for a little bit. No Rashid Shaheed, who was a speedster as well. So it looks like we're going to lose Clint Kubiak to the Seattle Seahawks, and then we'll see if Joe Woods is able to do anything defensively. So in the grand scheme of things, it could probably look rough for the Saints if McCarthy came over. But I think some pros that I'm looking at here is he's got experience, right? 13 seasons in the NFL. We understand he's got a 60% winning record, which is, fair, all things considered. And again, when you look at how everything is played out with New Orleans this season, going into the offseason, I think a guy that 10 out of 13 seasons has a winning record, has 3 straight 12-win seasons, albeit whether he did or didn't do certain things with the Cowboys, he was still able to be responsible for 36 wins in a 3-year span. Now, yes, one of those should have been an NFC Championship game, and I'm not the biggest fan of Dak Prescott. I didn't really care for when Kellen Moore was there, or some of the, after offensive coordinators that were able to call plays. 9 out of the 13 seasons he's been in the playoffs, he's got an 11-11 record in such games, a 500 spread there. So again, for considering how bad this job is, and if we could just get someone of his ilk, I'm not saying he's elite, I'm not saying he's a top 5 or a top 12 coach in this league, but I didn't think we could have somebody really want to come coach for us in this aspect. And it's going to be rough, right? And that gets me into my cons. Can he handle a rebuild? Because I think the Net Saints head coach is kind of going to be scapegoated. They'll be here for a year, maybe 2 years, but their biggest task is going to be, how can you help us manage the cap? How can you help us score in the draft, which we've been horrible at the last few years on both of those aspects? And how can we figure out how to prioritize the quarterback of the future? I believe Mike McCarthy himself is the most fit for that job. Gail Benson and Mickey Loomis will give him free reins. Now, does he understand how to have free reins? Not necessarily sure, because we know Jerry is the man over there in Jerry world. That's literally why they call it that. Being the GM, being the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, he really wants a yes man at coach. That's why Sean Payton wasn't able to land the job with the Cowboys in the past, because Sean Payton is too strong-headed of a guy. And I think you bring someone over like McCarthy who could have free reign, go out and hire his staff. That kind of makes me nervous as well. There, another one of my cons, can he employ a staff that is actually reputable? Because like you said, he's not great at calling plays. If you have a gun to his head, it's going to be a very bad decision on whether he's able to make a right play call or not. Shrinking in big moments. We saw that plenty of times. I mean, the fact that the Cowboys were damn near winless, if they weren't possibly winless at home this year, was absolutely horrible. You look at the fact that they were, horrible in first round matchups at home as well, especially when you had those back-to-back 12-win seasons. Him not being able to perform in that aspect is horrible. And then if you're not able to manage the clock at pivotal moments of games as well, that's just going to really be an eyesore that's very, very magnified at the end of the day when you look at it. So I do kind of think, and we're not going to do a record prediction. I know I had that originally on the lineup. I kind of threw it there mistakenly, because we don't know if he's going to be the coach for the Saints. But this ironically feels like a top 3 choice for New Orleans based on the sole fact of experience. He knows how to coach. When you're talking about a Joe Brady, who's never been a head coach, when you're talking about a Darren Rizzi, who was the assistant coach, came in as the interim, we've interviewed him, so maybe he could jump in as well. It feels humbling to know that a guy of this experience would just possibly want to come over and be with the organization.
Hey, it's AJL here. Appreciate you sticking to the end of the video here on YouTube. You could have chose any other show, but you chose my video, and for that, I'm very grateful. If you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media. Hit the bell on the channel so you never miss a post. Check me out on all social media platforms. Right here, you'll find a chance to subscribe to the show, a related video, and a playlist. See you guys in the next one.